From the dust of forgotten plains rose a dream no empire believed possible. Not a weapon, not a wall, but a single drop of milk pure, sovereign, and born of Burkinab's soil. Within one turn of the seasons, Traoré's vision took form, a revolution, not of guns, but of nourishment. Factories rose where deserts once stood, children drank where hunger once ruled, and an entire continent began to believe again. The West called it impossible, Africa called it destiny, and the world would soon call it a miracle. Within a single turn of the seasons, Traoré forged a humble dairy dream into a sovereign system of pure milk, a promise fulfilled for over 14,000 children. Its reach spanned across 5 great African nations, built without the crutch of foreign aid, without the need for refrigerated fleets, and without asking for the world's permission. A European envoy, his voice a stunned whisper, confessed, "This should not be possible. Our own laboratories lack such technology." Yet behind him, the cattle of a new age grazed in peace. A ribbon, a symbol of destiny, was cut. A thunderous applause shook the very earth. The world's empires had not foreseen this rise. Remain with us, witness this chronicle. See how a single bottle of milk rewrote our future. Declare the land from which you hear this tale and honor this story with your like and subscription for more sagas of our people's strength. As gates to the $2 billion dairy titan swung open, tears of pride streamed from the eyes of our farmers. The joyous clapping of children echoed like a victory song. Officials of the old guard stood motionless, struggling to comprehend the dawn they now witnessed. Upon the horizon, a new era was in motion. Robotic arms, tireless and precise, loaded crates of milk, each carton bearing the proud name, Faso Kosam. This was not the powder of dependence, not the milk of distant foreign shores. It was fresh, it was cold, it was pure and wholly Burkinab. Traoré did not emerge from the grand stage. He walked from the side, a shadow to the press, a servant unseen by the camera's glare. He sought no podium. He required no military salute. He came with only his work boots and a humble smile. He first clasped the hands of the workers, the true builders. Then his gaze lifted to the banner, a declaration hanging above, nourishing Burkina, one glass at a time. An elder herdsman, Bako, drew near and spoke in reverence. "You have done it, Captain. Our victory is shared. We have all achieved this, together. Only 1 year before this glorious day, this very ground was but a wasteland of dust." The elders of the village would often jest, "Only the termite can claim a kingdom here." Foreign investors had dismissed it as barren, fruitless terrain. Yet this was the epicenter, what the French press reluctantly called the agricultural miracle of the century. Yet, this was no miracle sent from the heavens, it was forged by vision and the sweat of our brows. Within the heart of the great facility, Western delegates walked the hallowed halls. Some held their hands clasped behind their backs in disbelief. Others folded their arms in silent concession. They passed great rows of chilled fermentation tanks, powered by sovereign solar cores, guided by AI. Dutch executives murmured amongst themselves, "How can they store this without nitrogen pumps?" A German analyst, his voice low with astonishment, muttered, "These machines are not of our design." He spoke the truth. They were not. Every gear, every circuit, every blueprint was born from Traoré's unwavering decree. No imported systems that would chain us to dependency. This plant was more than a factory. It was a declaration of our freedom. Then, in a moment of sudden revelation, one of the visitors let his tablet fall from his grasp. It had detected a new, proprietary filtration system, one that could vanquish 98% of bacteria without a single volt of electricity. His voice trembled as he dared to ask, "From where did this technology originate?" The guide, a young Burkinabe scientist, a daughter of this land in a white lab coat, offered a proud smile. "It came from here," she declared. "It was conceived in Ouagadougou, and it was built by the hands of our own people." Outside, under the same proud sun, scores of local dairy farmers gathered behind a green banner. Their voices were not just cheering, they were raised in powerful song, an ancient harvest chant of their ancestors, a hymn of the earth now reborn for a new age. Traoré approached the stage for a brief address. He offered no grand, sweeping oration, only a few words, sharp and true as a spear. Europe cast its doubt upon our spirit, but our cattle know nothing of doubt. The land does not recognize politics, and our dignity will never ask for permission. He then raised a simple glass of milk, not the champagne of colonizers, a toast to a new, sovereign destiny. Drink this, he commanded with a patriot's fire, and taste the essence of our freedom. The applause that followed was not merely polite. It was a visceral roar from the soul of a nation, the kind of sound that seizes your heart and brings the sting of pride to your eyes. One foreign diplomat stood frozen in the crowd, his lips pressed into a thin, hard line. He turned to his aide, his voice a grave whisper. Do you truly comprehend the meaning of this? If they can replicate this on a grand scale, if this is not just a performance for the world, our economic dominion in West Africa is finished. But this was no performance. This was a promise. In a humble classroom not far from the celebration, the children of Burkina were already receiving their daily milk, a gift from a new national nutrition program. And in a great, chilled storehouse behind the main plant, shipments were being prepared for their sacred journey, not to the ports of France or the United States, but to our brothers and sisters in Mali, Togo, and Niger. Africa was finally feeding Africa. And at the very heart of this continental rebirth stood a man in a red beret, with hands hardened by toil. He was not a general of old armies, nor a politician of empty words. He was simply a son of the soil. And this great work was only the beginning. The relentless sun scorched the earth, until the ground itself fractured in thirst. Great curtains of dust swept across the barren plain, where not even the hardy goats dared to linger. This was the kind of land that breathed failure into men's hearts. A place to be crossed, to be endured, never a place to build a home or a future. But Ibrahim Traoré stood defiant, in the very heart of that desolate field. His boots were planted firm in the soil, his arms crossed over his chest, his gaze as unwavering as the horizon. He was surrounded by his ministers, who shifted with unease, in their finely tailored suits, their polished shoes now stained red by the sacred earth. At last, one of them broke the heavy silence. "Captain," he began, "with all due respect, we must be realistic. This vision is not feasible. Not in this place. Not on this unforgiving land. Not for something as precious as milk." Another minister quickly added his voice to the doubt. "There is no precedent for such a feat. Even the Dutch have not tamed such arid land. No nation on earth has done this." Traoré did not offer an immediate reply. He simply stared toward the distant horizon, watching the wind summon small ghosts from the dust. Then he knelt to the ground. He gathered a handful of the red soil and let it fall like sand through his fingers. They spoke these same words about electricity. They whispered them about our security, about the education of our children. "But we are here. We are still standing," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "And mark my words, we shall rise to this challenge once more." A wave of cynical laughter rose from a small gathering of villagers nearby who had been observing the solemn discussion. A few of them leaned wearily on their walking sticks. Others just smirked, their arms folded in defiance. One of them shouted across the field, "And what will these cows of yours drink, Captain Dust?" The laughter grew louder, echoing across the plains. It was in that moment of doubt that she came forward. Salima Dio, a woman standing tall, her shoulders forged, strong by years of carrying water, her face etched not by the passage of time, but by a fierce, unyielding defiance. Her voice cut through the wind like the beat of a war drum. "Give me the cattle," she declared, her voice ringing with certainty. "And I swear on the spirits of my ancestors, I will give you rivers of gold in return." The men turned to face her, startled by her conviction. Some of them scoffed at her audacity. One of them muttered under his breath, "Behold her once more," they whispered, "the peasant who dreams of a nation's destiny." But Traoré's resolve remained an unyielding stone. He gave a solemn nod, a promise forged in silence. "Your dream shall be made real," he vowed. 3 weeks hence, a new chapter began. Salima received 12 dairy cows, a sacred trust, a healthy native breed, born of their own soil, delivered by a state truck in the hallowed silence before dawn. And in the span of that very week, destiny moved. The first sacred blueprint was laid upon the table. Traoré spurned the great European firms. He summoned 5 young engineers, the nation's own sons, all scholars of Burkina Faso, forged in its universities. They had gleaned wisdom from foreign lands, yet chose to return to the heart of their motherland. When so many others had forsaken her soil, their council was held in a humble, dust-filled tent, with no cool air to soothe the burning heat, only an old fan, a lone sentinel buzzing in the corner. Each unfurled sketches drawn by their own hands, and rough-hewn prototypes born of pure will. "We shall not bow to imported machines," Traore declared, his voice a decree. "We will forge our own path, with our own hands." "But the sacred process of pasteurization?" a young mind queried. "We require a system of cooling that can endure, one that thrives where the foreign grid does not reach." "We will not be shackled to their grid," Traore proclaimed. "We shall build our own grid. We build our own world." A profound silence fell, heavy with the weight of his words. Then spoke the youngest of them, a man of barely 24 years, who adjusted his spectacles and spoke with clarity. "I have studied a Russian design, a testament to ingenuity. It harnesses the sun's fire with vacuum-insulated chillers. If we were to adapt its principles, we would owe no debt to foreign powers. Design it anew from our own soil, make it superior," Traore interjected, his voice cutting through all doubt. And so, the saga was born. The great Faso Kosam dairy project began its chronicle, not within the cold walls of a boardroom, not among suited investors with foreign coin, but upon the hallowed ground of the motherland, where dust was consecrated by ink and sovereign ambition. And as the dairy titans of Europe watched from afar, their mouths filled with mockery and hollow press releases, speaking of Africa's supposed agricultural illusions, a truth, solid and real, was already taking form, hidden from their condescending gaze. In the swift passage of a single month, the first true prototype of a milk filtration unit stood humming upon the sacred earth. It was powered by gravity's pull, not foreign electricity, and its purpose was fulfilled. It worked. Yet the forces of resistance did not relent. The world's investors turned their backs, refusing their gold. A council of economists issued a dire warning. "The reforms of our minds already draw their fire. Do not add this defiant milk to the flames." A great bank of West Africa, once an ally, retreated on the eve of the signing, breaking its pact. Traore's spirit did not waver. He did not flinch. He summoned his most trusted cabinet to the courtyard of a forgotten military fortress, now reborn as the heart of their revolutionary plans. Beneath the vast and unforgiving sky, he laid bare the true cost of their freedom. "Our state budget will be cut by 20%. There will be no chariots of luxury for us. There will be no bonuses paid in gold. This wealth belongs to the people. It returns to them now." Salima, the spirit of the land, stood at his side, bearing a simple bucket filled with fresh milk, the first offering from just 12 humble cows. She passed the vessel from hand to hand, a sacred communion. The ministers of the nation partook of its purity. One among them, a man long steeped in doubt and cynicism, set down his tin cup and whispered with reverence, "It is sweet, purer than any milk from foreign shores." "As it should be," Salima affirmed with quiet dignity, "for it is born of our own sacred land." And so, the great work truly began. The very bricks of the foundation were laid by teachers who offered their labor after their lessons. The pipes were set in place by the hands of soldiers. The panels that would harness the sun were mounted by the nation's students on their days of rest. There was no grand ceremony to mark this genesis, no silken ribbon to be cut, no foreign press to record the moment. There was only the nobility of the work itself, and the sacred blueprints, stained not with ink, but with sweat. This was a covenant sealed by labor, not by signatures. As the fourth month drew to its heroic close, the foundations of the great facility stood complete. A humble processing unit hummed to life within its walls. Salima gave it a name of simple power, Room 1. It knew not the comfort of cooled air. No gleaming chrome machinery stood within. Yet from its heart, it produced 20 liters of pure, life-giving milk each day, and every single sacred drop was delivered as a gift, without price, to the humble clinics of the countryside, where children weakened by hunger awaited a miracle. This was the turning of the tide, the moment of change, when the mothers of the nation began to gather, forming a hopeful line outside the plant before the sun's first light, their empty bottles a testament to their faith. It was when the village elders, wise and revered, sent forth their sacred letters of blessing. It was when the voices of the local radio began to speak of the great project not as Traore's fleeting dairy fantasy, but as our nation's future, held within a bottle. And yet, the great powers of Europe refused to believe. Their eyes saw no towering cranes against the sky, no gleaming towers of imported steel, no orders for the machines of their world. They could not perceive the truth, the quiet revolution that was unfolding beneath the dust. But Salima, her eyes clear, saw it all. She wiped the noble sweat from her brow and gazed upon the rising edifice behind her, speaking to a visiting journalist with a steady voice. They believed true milk flowed only from their white factories. Very well, then, we shall show them the magnificent power of brown hand. The journalist, in his fear, did not print her words. But Traore heard them, and they fueled his resolve. And so, the sacred blueprint continued to expand. The sun of a new morning had barely breached the sacred line of the horizon when Traore himself arrived, a solitary figure, at the old telecommunications fortress, now consecrated as the command center for the dawn of Burkina Faso's industrial age. He wore his iconic red beret, a symbol of defiance, and boots still carrying the dust of the people's land. He came with no gilded entourage. No grand military parade announced his presence. He was simply a man bound to a sacred mission. The only object he carried in his hand was a simple white folder, thick with the weight of a nation's hope, worn from countless hours of devotion and stained by the dust and determination of months. Within its humble pages lay the final, perfected iteration of the dairy facility's most classified blueprint. The very air of the room was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and tireless ambition. Gathered around a cracked and weathered table sat the 4 chosen engineers, 2 seasoned specialists from the Russian lands, their fingers stained with the honorable grease of labor, and 2 young sons of Burkina Faso, whose eyes betrayed they had slept but 3 hours between the long, arduous sessions of creation. As one, they rose to their feet upon the moment of Traore's entrance. With a simple gesture, he bade them be seated. First, show me where we are weak, he commanded simply. Jabari, one of the nation's own engineers, drew a complex schematic forth from the pile and laid it flat upon the table for all to see. If we demand of this system, he began, the power to cool 10,000 liters a day, our solar grid will strain at 80% of its limit. Our battery reserves will fall swiftly. When the great rains come and obscure the Sunday, what is our margin of endurance? Traore asked. 7 days beneath a sky of solid cloud. Beyond that time, we will require a secondary source of power. You speak of diesel? Traore inquired, his tone sharp. A moment of hesitation fell upon Jabari. Yes, my captain, but that would compromise our sacred green directive. Traore gave a slow, deliberate nod of understanding. Then we shall not surrender to diesel. You will fortify the reserve, make it stronger. But my captain, that will cost us precious time, perhaps even months of labor, Jabari countered. We are not building this for the fleeting applause of others, Traore stated, his voice as solid as the earth itself. We build a legacy for generations to come. From across the great chamber, a wise consultant from the Russian lands presented him with a single, stark white page. Behold, the heart of your purification. It requires no foreign power, no intricate, failing parts. Its lifeblood will flow for 20 years. Traore's gaze fell upon the sacred design. The filter's genius was in its heritage, harnessing pressure and the earth's own layers. A design of profound and elegant simplicity, an instrument of raw, unyielding power. Is this marvel of your own creation? He asked. A knowing smile graced the Russians' faces. No, they answered with humble pride. Your kin did. We merely helped you reclaim your faith in it. Before a word could be uttered in reply, a firm knock echoed from the great steel door. An aide entered the chamber, his eyes filled with a wary caution, his voice a low, urgent whisper. The foreign envoys have arrived. 3 delegates from a foreign power, clad in suits of gray, were ushered into their presence. They represented a global food empire, its throne established in the heart of Belgium. Their arrival was sudden, an unheralded descent. They came upon a private chariot of the skies. A legion of guards stood as their sentinels. They carried their own scripture of commerce. Their elder, a man who bore the name of Mr. Lormet, set down his gilded case upon the sacred table. "We have observed your great endeavor," he began, "and truth be told, we find ourselves quite impressed." Traore offered only a stoic, unbroken silence. Mr. Lormet unsealed his case and slid forth a polished, tempting proposal. "We offer to invest 40% regarding the plant's finances. In return for our generosity, we shall grant you machines of great power, allocation, and the arcane knowledge of our experts for a mere tenth of your projected sacrifice." One of the nation's young builders stifled a breath of disbelief. Traore's gaze remained fixed upon the gilded offer. "And what of dominion?" he asked, his voice like steel. "Complete European command over the lifeblood of this great work for the first 8 years," Mr. Lormet declared. "Then we shall share the spoils. Your nation will still reap a tremendous bounty. Mastery and leadership shall remain in European hands, but we guarantee your people toil and coin." A heavy silence descended upon the chamber. Traore glanced at the simple white scroll in his hand, the one featuring the artisanal filter, and then at the shimmering pact on the table. Two destiny lay before him, two visions for the soul of his nation. With solemn grace, he rose to his feet. "Let my words ring with clarity," he proclaimed. "You offer the illusion of speed. You offer gleaming, hollow machines. You offer the siren's call of cheaper costs. But what your hearts truly covet is the deed to our sacred fields, the ownership of our herds, the very milk of our motherland. And yes, you seek to claim our very pride." A confused chuckle escaped Lormet's lips. "Captain, this is the way of the world. We bring the finest systems known to man. Your nation profits from our might. Your people are gifted our progress." Traore advanced, his presence commanding the room, his voice a calm and steady river, but with an edge as sharp as obsidian. "Do you believe us ignorant of your gilded chains? You grant us a lease on your efficiency, and you dare to name it progress. But the price you demand is the currency of our dignity." He leaned forward, a predator's focus in his stare, his eyes locked with theirs, two burning embers. "I will not trade my nation's honor for your efficiency," he declared, his words a quiet, final decree. The silence that followed was a tangible thing. One of the Belgian envoys dared to break it. "With all due respect, Captain, this venture is doomed without global masters." Traore raised high the simple white page. "We have forged our own sacred pact," he answered. "It is here between the hands of our people and our ancestral land." The foreign delegates rose as one. One straightened his collar, a nervous gesture. "Then we can only wish you fortune. You will surely need it." As they retreated from the chamber, a heavy sigh escaped Jabari's lips. "Captain," he lamented, "that was billions of dollars in promised gold, now turned to dust." "No," Traore said, his voice a calm shore against a storm. "It was the sound of billions of chains being shattered." As twilight fell across the land, Traore returned to the hallowed ground of the work. He found Salima there, a warrior among her people, guiding the hands that laid the foundation. Her eyes caught the scroll in his hand as she asked, "Does that paper carry ill tidings?" "No," he answered with a warrior's resolve. "They offered us their gilded assistance. We respectfully declined." A smile of pure understanding bloomed on her face. "It is good. I do not trust the smiles of men who speak of partnership but mean dominion." He laughed softly and passed the sacred page to her. "This knowledge is now yours to command. It is the heart of your creation." Salima gazed upon the ancient diagram. "Much of this wisdom is still hidden from me. You will master it," he vowed, "and then you will pass this fire to the next daughter, so she will never need to bow her head and ask for permission." The crimson symbol of their revolution, the white scroll of their independence. This was the true and unbreakable covenant, and its terms were sealed not with ink, but with something far stronger, with the unyielding iron of conviction. On the morning of their arrival, their coming went unseen by the world. No crimson carpet was rolled out for them. No false lights of the press heralded their return. Only a silent convoy of humble, dust-caked buses, rolling in before the dawn's first light, their windows clouded by the breath of true determination. Within rode 34 of Africa's finest young minds, sons and daughters of Ouagadougou, of Accra, Bamako, and the shores of Dar es Salaam. Many had journeyed for years through Russia, Cuba, and India, mastering the arts of renewable power, the secrets of agricultural robotics, and the dance of fluid dynamics. Their homecoming was not marked by grand ceremony. but by a profound and purposeful silence. As the buses came to rest upon the sacred ground, a single woman was the first to descend. Her name was Asha, a beacon of the new dawn. Her sacred texts were notebooks filled with hand-drawn plans. She gazed upon the dry earth and broken stone and declared, "Here, our great work begins." Moments later, a sound of creation rang out. The first shovel broke the consecrated soil, not in a feverish search for gold, not in a desperate thirst for oil, but for the pure, white lifeblood of their future, milk. No foreign scribes came to witness this birth. They had long ago dismissed this sacred ground, deemed a failed endeavor. No Western moneylenders graced them with their presence. They had already cast their judgment, decreeing that the numbers did not align. But as the shovels bit deep into the motherland, as skeletons of steel reached for the heavens, and sun catchers were borne on determined shoulders, a storm of liberation was quietly gathering force. What say you of Traore's defiant stand against foreign dominion? Proclaim Amen if you champion this vision of African self-reliance. Meanwhile, in the gilded halls of Brussels, the chieftain of a great European dairy empire sat before his council of cynical analysts. An image of the hallowed Burkina Bay site, stolen by spies, was cast upon the wall for all to mock, a blurred vision of patriots in mismatched battle dress and the worn boots of humble warriors. The chieftain laughed, a sound of hollow arrogance. "Do they even grasp the simple magic of pasteurization?" he jeered. The chamber echoed with the smug laughter of the ignorant. But back on the sacred soil of Burkina Faso, something entirely different was unfolding. Asha and her cohort of builders wasted not a single breath. The central hub was segmented into 4 operational zones: filtration, pasteurization, fermentation, and bottling. Each was crafted with utmost accuracy for minimal energy usage and local resource acquisition. Not a single component relied on imported chemical coolants or diesel-powered compressors. Instead, they harnessed solar aquifers and ceramic thermal exchangers, technology quietly developed in student laboratories, while the world turned a blind eye. They were not merely constructing a dairy facility, they were forging a paradigm that could thrive on its own terms, even if the world chose to ignore it. Jabari, one of the leading local engineers, rewired the core cooling system overnight, upon realizing European designs could not maintain efficiency above 38 degrees Celsius. "Build for Europe, and you invite European failure?" he muttered quietly. "But we build for Borsina." Each unit passed through 6 hands before receiving approval. Every engineer rotated roles. As builders, welders, even electricians, they toiled by lantern light, often barefoot, always striving beyond what they were told was achievable. There were no press releases, only advancement. A week into construction, a delegation from a West African trade bloc arrived unexpectedly. Anticipating a failed prototype, they instead discovered a skeleton of steel rising from the dust, alive with activity. One official blinked in astonishment. "Who oversees this?" "We do," Asha replied simply. "No foreign overseers. Only the cows are imported." They did not linger. In the capital, murmurs began to circulate. Ministers who once dismissed the project as a fantasy started sending aides to observe the site. Industry insiders sought updates, but Traore kept them at bay. This was not a spectacle, it was a foundation. Meanwhile, the team constructed a water cooling chamber, adorned with bamboo panels and bioresin, an innovation they had crafted during a competition in Belarus 2 years prior. It maintained the internal chambers at optimal temperatures without consuming a single watt of grid power. During evening meals, the engineers gathered on crates, eating rice and beans with their hands, sketching blueprints on napkins, jotting notes in the dirt. One night, Asha surveyed the circle and declared, "They believed we were merely the help, but in truth, we are the architects." There was no applause, just knowing nods. That same week, a foreign journalist stationed in West Africa finally visited the site. She captured photographs, took notes, and later submitted a brief, dismissive article. Burkina Faso's dream dairy plant lacks international oversight. She cited an anonymous Western dairy consultant who cautioned, without proper training, even the finest machines will decay. She failed to realize there were no foreign machines. They constructed everything, and by the end of that month, as trucks began to arrive, delivering rough milk from Salima's village, the engineers did not pause to celebrate. They simply opened their notebooks and commenced designing the next upgrade for the pasteurization chamber. The revolution was not broadcasted. It was hand-welded, line by line, bolt by bolt, dream by dream, and it had merely just commenced. The first convoy of cattle arrived at dawn, hooves clicking on plywood ramps, steam rising from their hides into the crisp air. Workers paused mid-hammer, observing as veterinarians guided each animal toward shaded paddocks, lined with fresh straw. Traore stood by the gate, with Salima counting softly. 12, 20, 30. Each cow bore a ribbon of vibrant cloth around its neck, a vow that it would never be regarded as a disposable asset. Detractors had anticipated a spectacle. They witnessed discipline instead. Each animal was scanned, vaccinated, and groomed before touching Burkinab soil. Traore insisted on imported mineral blocks, filtered water, and solar-powered fans to deter insects. A senior budget officer grumbled, "Machines first, Captain. Cattle later." "Steel does not moo if we are delayed," Traore retorted. "Steel will not bleed for us either. These cows, they are the living engines of the factory. Engines must be nurtured." News spread swiftly in Ouagadougou. An economist ridiculed the project on morning radio. Royal treatment for cows. While children go hungry, he asserted, overlooking that the milk was intended for those very children. At the construction site, the laughter bore no weight. The cows chewed serenely, tails flicking, as the engineers resumed welding the frame of the pasteurization hall. By midday, the temperature soared. Rather than driving the herd into shelters, Traore commanded a halt to all machine operations. Crews erected a lattice of bamboo screens over the paddocks, then hoisted reflective tarps, stitched from old grain sacks. The shade lowered the ground temperature by 10 degrees Celsius. A younger engineer, Fadil, wiped sweat from his brow. "We just paused $1 million project for animals," he murmured. Asha responded, without glancing up from her tablet. "If the herd fails, the plant fails. This is the blueprint." That afternoon, children from a neighboring village of scholars arrived alongside their mentor to witness the true essence of progress. A young lad named Thierno, merely 8 years old, gazed inquisitively over the fence. A gentle cow nudged forward, and Salima invited him within. Beneath a canopy of solar panels that served as a luminous array, the boy perched upon a small wooden stool. Salima tenderly guided his hands. Warm milk flowed into a tin pail, shimmering gold beneath the LED glow. The moment captured time itself. A child, a cow, and technology united in Siena Harmony. A Reuters correspondent chanced upon the scene, yet dismissed it as mere sentimental fluff, unworthy of global finance pages. He turned his focus instead to the half-constructed tower cranes and the lack of European brand insignias. His headline that evening would proclaim, "Burkina Faso dairy facility lacks modern apparatus." He never mentioned Thierno, nor the flavor of fresh milk that widened the boy's eyes in wonder. As twilight descended, generators powered down, and the site transitioned to battery storage. The soft hum of insects filled the silence between distant welding sparks. Traore patrolled the perimeter, with Musa, the herdsman, examining every waterline. Musa traced a finger along a copper pipe. "You could have opted for plastic. More economical," he remarked. "Plastic becomes brittle," Traore countered. "I desire these pipes to endure as I age." Within the temporary control trailer, spreadsheets illuminated on recycled screens. The finance team forecasted rising expenses, veterinary supplies, fodder, cultivation, staff training. An advisor cautioned of overruns, his voice frail. "We will exceed the budget by 10% if we pursue this animal-first approach." Traore circled the figure with a blunt pencil. "Record it as an investment, not a loss," he asserted. "Milk lasts but a day. Trust endures for generations." Beyond the trailer, the new herd rested on soft straw, bellies full, breathing gently, beneath fans powered by the same sun that had scorched the earth a month prior. Thierno's stool remained where he had left it, a small symbol of what dignity resembled when bestowed upon those who needed it most. That night, critics on social media shared drone images of the incomplete plant, ridiculing the scant machinery and proud cows. European commentators yesterday, perhaps they will teach the animals to operate the valves. On the site, Asha sat beneath a lantern, adjusting sensor calibrations. She read the comment, smiled to herself, and whispered to no one, "Let them laugh now." In the capital, a team of international analysts commenced drafting a thorough evaluation of the project's feasibility. Their conclusions were nearly complete, typed in assertive phrases, supported by vibrant graphs that illustrated inevitable failure. They omitted a single line about copper pipes or shaded paddocks or a boy learning to milk. Beneath solar illumination, they would publish in 7 days. By then, the first leaders from the royal herd would roll into cold storage, prepared to confront every doubt head-on. The cows slumbered. The machines awaited. The future moved silently through the night, alive and breathing. It commenced with one report, an 89-page analysis discreetly issued by the Institute for Global Agricultural Investment, released on a Sunday, buried amid news of a European summit and a celebrity scandal. It should have gone unnoticed, yet by Monday morning, the headlines had already taken form. Burkina's dairy gamble destined for failure, and Traore's vision, a $2 billion abyss. The report didn't bother with images or interviews. It relied on algorithms, charts, and abstract terminology, unfavorable yield zones, volatile currency risks, inadequate technological oversight. There were no quotes from workers, no mention of Salima, no footage of the herd or of Thierno milking beneath solar light, just a chorus of Western metrics declaring the entire endeavor unsustainable. Within 48 hours, 3 international investment groups halted their funding commitments. A fourth discreetly withdrew. A financial advisor in Dar es Salaam cautioned that any further association with the project would be economically disastrous. Western media seized the story and ran with it like wolves on a hunt. CNN Africa aired a segment titled "Overbuilt, Underplanned," showcasing slow-motion footage of unfinished construction and cows grazing idly. The anchor smirked while stating, "Many view this as a classic instance of ambition outpacing infrastructure." Even Al Jazeera published an editorial asserting, "Traore's vision lacks the logistical framework for success." At the construction site, the shift supervisor read the article aloud during lunch. Workers fell silent. Jabari, the lead engineer, folded the paper and cast it into a bucket of wet cement. Inside the operations trailer, Traore gathered his core team. No one uttered a word. The atmosphere felt heavier than ever before. "We anticipated resistance," he said calmly, surveying their weary faces, "but we didn't foresee the retreat of those who professed to believe in us." Zaina crossed her arms. "They never believed. They gambled. And now that it appears challenging, they fold." Traore nodded. "Then we shall not withdraw." Yet reality pressed heavily. Deliveries slowed. A critical shipment of lab-grade tubing was stalled at customs under the pretext of absent regulatory approval. A logistics company from Europe terminated its agreement without any reason given. The financial reserves were rapidly depleting. Then came the murmurs in the capital. "He has overstepped." It was pride, not prudence. "He's pretending to be a farmer while the nation suffers." Salima caught every word from the radio in her vehicle as she transported milk samples back to the site. That evening, she pulled off the road, climbed onto a rusted barrel, and gazed across her village. Then she proclaimed, "We gather tonight. Bring every chair, every lantern, every woman who owns a cow." They arrived in sandals, in wraps, with infants strapped to their backs and fists raised. Farmers, educators, tailors, even a retired midwife who hadn't stepped outside in 2 years. Salima stood beneath a tree and spoke from the heart. "They claim we lack direction. They say our cows are idle, our land too parched, our aspirations unworthy of investment. Well, they've made their choice," she declared, gesturing to the earth. "This is ours. And if they refuse to invest, we shall." Someone cried out, "With what funds?" Salima lifted a jar, brimming with coins. "Let's begin here. Every woman who sells milk, every man who owns a goat, every youth, with a phone, to share the truth. We do not wait for permission to claim our power. A soft murmur transformed into applause. Then applause evolved into a chant, Kosam, Kosam, Kosam milk. The following morning, Traore stood on the construction platform, observing dozens of villagers arrive, with jars, baskets, and boxes. Some carried bills, others brought produce to nourish workers, all of it imbued with purpose. A child handed him a folded note. We believe in you more than they fear you. Traore passed it to Jabari. Frame that, he instructed. It's worth more than the report. That same afternoon, an elderly man in tattered clothes approached the gate. He inquired about Salima. When she arrived, he placed a single egg into her hand. My hen laid it this morning, he said softly. I thought, let it build something grand and significant. She swallowed hard and nodded. It will, she affirmed. Meanwhile, the analysts who authored the report were being lauded in European business circles. They were invited to discussions, offered consulting positions, praised for their so-called brutal honesty. But on the ground in Burkina Faso, something was stirring. It wasn't reflected in spreadsheet. It was in footsteps, in hands, in sweat, and the cement continued to set. When the first 100 cows arrived, there were cheers. Not the kind of cheers staged for cameras, but deep, troati, ancestral sounds. The kind of joy that arises from reclaiming something that was never meant to be lost. The cows stepped off the trucks, slowly acclimating to the dry wind and the open plains, their eyes searching for something unknown. Yet there were no gates, no barbed wire, no electric fences. A journalist from Abidjan, who came to document the moment, asked, where will they actually be kept? Salima, standing beside a young girl with a milking bucket, replied simply, they'll remain because this very place, it's home. The reporter raised an eyebrow. You trust cows with no boundaries whatsoever? Traore arrived, just in time to hear the inquiry. He smiled. We trust the people surrounding them. That's the distinction that truly matters. The cows roamed freely that day. Pastures stretched across 40 acres of land that had once been deemed barren by foreign consultants, by foreign advisors. Rather than fences, the site was crafted with naturally integrated border markers, rows of indigenous trees, shallow irrigation channels, and shaded resting spots that invited the animals inward rather than confining them. It was a groundbreaking method, where decades of imported farming methods, where years of imported agricultural techniques had instilled control was electrified, stemmed from restriction. But here, freedom with accountability. Soon, news reached Brussels. At an agricultural exhibition, a Belgian lobbyist took the stage, mocking, as images of the Burkinab dairy project flickered behind him. They're dubbing it innovation, he remarked, his voice dripping with irony. I deem it chaos. No structure, no fencing, just cows, merely cows, and a vast amount of hope. The audience chuckled, yet back in Burkina Faso, events were unfolding differently. Asha tracked herd movement with solar-powered devices crafted by local engineering students. Each cow donned a tag that relayed data to a dashboard on her tablet, monitoring hydration, distance traveled, even stress level. The cows instinctively moved toward water and shade. For force or fear, not through force or fear. The pasture was designed with precision. We don't cage what we genuinely respect, Jabari remarked one evening as he observed the cows settle beneath a moonlit sky. And that's sufficient for them. Doubt lingered in the air. A European development envoy dispatched a confidential message to the Ministry of Agriculture, cautioning against biosecurity threats and the unpredictability of livestock. One line stated, free-roaming animals compromise safety and efficiency. A containment strategy is utterly vital. Traore read it, then erased it in silence. Instead, he wandered barefoot through the pasture the following morning, accompanied by village elders. One elder, a man named Karamo, touched the soil and proclaimed, this land, it remembers our cattle walks. Before the chain, before the gates, you have restored that to us. Traore responded. I did not restore it. I merely ceased to obstruct it. Then came a trial. One afternoon, a motorbike backfired. On the road by the pasture, the loud bang startled several cows. One bolted, racing toward the field's edge. Workers panicked. Yet the cow halted at the tree line, then turned back. It surveyed its surroundings, snorted gently, and returned to the herd. Asha, who had witnessed it all, beamed. It works? It truly works, she murmured. Even Zalima, a woman hard to impress, remarked, they know where home lies now. That signifies everything. As the dairy initiative advanced, tales of the fenceless farm began to circulate across the Sahel. Young farmers from Niger came to observe. Delegates from Sahel requested a tour. Even a quiet inquiry arrived from a South American cooperative, intrigued by the method, and still no fences were erected. One evening, a boy, no older than 10, sat beside his grandfather outside the cow shelter. He asked, Grandpa, are you afraid they'll escape or get lost? The old man chuckled. When something is yours, truly yours, it does not flee. It takes root, it remains. That same night, an investor from the Middle East arrived unexpectedly. He surveyed the pasture silently, anticipating chaos. Instead, he witnessed tranquility. Nearby, children gathered water without fear. He turned to Traore and said, This does not resemble any dairy facility I have ever encountered. It is not, Traore replied. It is a promise, not a facility. The investor chose not to invest, but he departed with admiration. And the next morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, a child once again knelt beneath a cow and filled her tin cup with fresh milk. No wire, no fence, no fear. Just trust, and that, in Burkina Faso, was sufficient. It was just past midnight when the ship arrived. No horns, no ceremony, just a slow, deliberate groan as the vessel glided into the port of Lomé under the shroud of darkness. The crew moved with precision, unloading crates that hummed softly, glowing faintly blue beneath the sealed container wraps. Each box bore the inscription, with 4 words, in bold black font, BF Dairy Sovereignty. No company name, no barcode, no European oversight. The dock workers, mostly young Togolese men, gazed at the unusual markings, whispering to one another in awe. Inside those crates lay the final components of Burkina Faso's dairy revolution. Custom filtration chambers, solar-integrated pasteurizers, ceramic chill coils, all crafted by a joint African-Russian development team in a lab outside St. Petersburg. Burkina Faso had spurned all Western supply chains. It had paid with raw materials, agricultural patents, and sovereign barter agreements. The outcome was a shipment invisible to Europe until this moment. At 3:17 a.m., a convoy of 12 unmarked trucks commenced loading the crates under strict security. Traore had enlisted only locals for the task. No uniforms, no flags, no noise. He understood this segment of the process was more vulnerable than all the others. But by 4:02 a.m., an official from Ecoways Customs, educated in Paris and stationed under French influence, stepped onto the loading dock with a clipboard and a smug demeanor. Halt the transfer immediately, he commanded. The workers froze. One of them inquired, on what grounds exactly? The official waved a paper in the air. We've been informed there may be unregistered technologies within these crates. We require an inspection immediately. A call was made, not to Traore, not to the Burkinabe government, but to Asha, who was already awake, in Ouagadougou, reviewing intake schematics. She listened without emotion, then uttered 2 words, seal everything. Back at the port, the men began securing the steel locks on the remaining crates. The customs officer stepped forward, indignant. You lack the authority. This is international law. One worker, an Eldana Matsando, met the officer's gaze and replied, then draft new laws, because these do not belong to you. By dawn, 8 of the 12 trucks had already departed, weaving inland toward Burkina Faso, across lesser-known trade routes, united with military guardianship. The remaining 4 remained silent. Their drivers leaned against their doors, refusing to unfasten a single latch. By noon, News of the standoff reached European newsrooms. Reuters published an article titled, "Borsina's clandestine dairy shipment stirs legal worries." The Guardian reported, "Is Russia arming Africa's agriculture as if milk machines and pasteurizers were instruments of war?" A Western analyst, interviewed on television, declared, "It's profoundly concerning to witness African nations sidestepping traditional trade allies in this manner. These unregulated technologies pose danger, not merely to safety, but to influence. That was the true concern." At the presidential office in Ouagadougou, Traoré stood before a chalkboard. No cameras, no press. On it were 3 paths, sketched in vibrant chalk, each marked with a distinct backup strategy. He turned to his team. "They attempted to halt the cattle," he proclaimed. "Then the land. Then the science. Now they seek to obstruct the steel." Jabari smiled. "But the steel has already moved, Captain. It's long departed." Salima arrived an hour later, with a crate key in her grasp. "One of your machines has just reached our field," she announced. "It's still warm. Would you like to come and see?" Traoré remained silent. He simply stepped outside and gazed up at the sky. It wasn't overcast, but the storm had arrived. That evening, the final 4 trucks were released from the port, following a surprise announcement from Togo's Minister of Transport. No nation shall be punished for forging its own dignity. It marked the first public deviation from the anticipated stance, and it sent shockwaves throughout the continent. Inside the first crate, delivered to the dairy plant, was a handwritten note affixed to the machine. "To our African allies, no barriers, no masters, only builders." The pasteurization unit powered on, consuming merely 22% of the anticipated energy load. Zaina stood beside it, tears flowing silently down her cheeks. Jabari touched the unit's side and murmured, "They fail to understand. We didn't import technology. We imported faith in ourselves." And for the first time, the hum of machinery harmonized with the sound of cows. Not to replace them, but to honor them. Steel Hut arrived, and it came without consent. Salima stood barefoot on the polished floor of the processing unit, staring down at the first chilled bottle of milk. The label read Faso Kosam in bold green letters. It had taken 1 year, 2 rainy seasons, 3 currency shocks, and more skepticism than she could tally. But now it was tangible. She didn't smile. She didn't weep. She opened the bottle, poured a small amount into a glass, and drank. Smooth, creamy, pure. She handed the remainder to Thierno, one of the young apprentices from her village. "Take it to the lab," she instructed. "Let's see if the cow concurs, shall we?" By evening, Burkina Faso's central lab completed its inaugural batch of quality control analysis. The results returned impeccable. Bacteria levels negligible. Nutrient content surpassing most West African milk brands. 0 additives, 0 preservatives. Jabari examined the report and raised his eyebrows. "We just produced the purest milk on the continent," he remarked with quiet awe. The team celebrated, but quietly. They understood what lay ahead. 2 days later, the first shipment was packed and dispatched to regional clinics and schools. Children in Kodogu, Kaya, and Bobo Dulaso received their first bottles, free of charge. No powdered formulas, no foreign emblems, just milk from their homeland for their bodies. Yet the celebration was short-lived. 3 weeks into production, an unforeseen email arrived at the Ministry of Health. The subject line read, "Urgent health risk advisory dairy imports from Burkina Faso." It was from a private German laboratory commissioned by a European dairy conglomerate. The message asserted that Fossum samples exhibited high turbidity levels and fell below European health standards for pasteurized dairy. The report cautioned of potential dangers if consumed without European-grade verification. The media seized upon it immediately. French news outlets reported, "Burkinabe milk under scrutiny." German tabloids shrieked, "Unregulated dairy inundates Sahel markets." A US business magazine queried, "Can West Africa manage high-tech milk?" The strike was swift and calculated. Salima received the news while unloading crates in a rural village. A nurse displayed the article on a phone screen. "Is it true?" she inquired. Salima gazed at it. "No," she replied slowly, "but they claim it's perilous now, don't they?" Salima placed a bottle into the nurse's hand. "Then, drink with me, right here, or cease to speak again." Back at the plant, Traore assembled his inner circle. The room felt chillier than usual. "They're targeting the symbol," Asha remarked. "They couldn't halt the cattle, couldn't stop the steel. So now, they assault the milk. They fear the power of belief," Jabari declared. "If this milk is pure, then the system that produced it is pure, and that shatters their entire framework." Traore nodded in agreement. "Let us shatter it completely." Within a day, Burkina Faso's National Laboratory unveiled a thorough, peer-reviewed study, authored by 3 esteemed African experts and 1 impartial observer from the World Food Programme. It not only disproved the German assertion, it annihilated it. The findings revealed Faso's milk contained 18% fewer harmful toxins than similar European supermarket brands. The cooling technique, crafted by local engineers, maintained natural probiotic structures more effectively than traditional pasteurization. The filtration system, constructed from ceramic and local clay, surpassed the bacterial filtration standards set by WH dairy regulation. The report concluded, "Milk this pure requires no permission to be trusted." A press conference took place in the capital. No formal attire, no banners. Just Salima, standing resolutely behind a table laden with fresh bottles. "I've raised cows for 30 years, she asserted. "I've nurtured children too. Do you think I'd feed them poison?" The reporters fell silent. A Western journalist dared to inquire, "Then why do European labs claim it's not pure milk?" Salima stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "Because we created it, not them. That's the sole reason." The room erupted in applause. Traore issued a brief statement to the press. "We shall no longer surrender our dignity to laboratories founded on colonial principles. We now measure ourselves with our own standards." The next day, schools throughout Burkina Faso initiated mandatory milk programs featuring Faso Kosam. Mothers queued to volunteer at distribution sites. Nurses at regional clinics began noting signs of enhanced nutrition among children within merely 2 weeks of daily consumption. Meanwhile, the European conglomerate that financed the German report attempted to retract, but it was too late. Social media across Africa ignited with a new hashtag, number, milk without chains. And on a small hill near the dairy plant, a boy sat in the grass, sipping from a bottle adorned with a cow on the label. His sister observed him, then asked, "Does it taste good to you?" He nodded. "Tastes like we did it ourselves?" Truly. The lights in the National Broadcast Studio were intense. A camera crew stood ready. Microphones tested. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, not due to politics or conflict, but because of a single glass of milk. On the central table rested a chilled bottle of Fascosum, freshly delivered from the plant. Its label shone under the lights, simple and striking. Beside it, 1 clear glass awaited, already half filled. At precisely 7 Saras p.m., the broadcast commenced. Traore entered quietly, not in uniform, but in a worn cotton shirt and old boots. No speeches prepared, no national anthem. He took his place, across from a local journalist, whose hands trembled ever so slightly beneath the desk. He gazed into the camera. No quay cards, no teleprompter. "This," he proclaimed, lifting the glass, "is not a mere gesture, not some symbol." He paused. "This isn't just a drink. It's evidence that we created something with our hands, our effort, and our determination." And then, before millions watching across the nation, and likely dozens of embassies abroad, he drank. The studio fell into silence. No applause, no music, just 1 swallow. He set the glass down gently, then looked at the camera once more. "There are those who claim we cannot sustain ourselves, that dignity must be imported, that nourishment must come in powdered packets, branded with foreign logos. Let this put an end to that narrative. Right here, right now." Within minutes, the moment had gone viral. Footage spread throughout Burkina Faso in mere seconds. Cafes replayed it on repeat. elderly women in villages wiped their tears as they watched from small televisions. Children raised their own bottles and mimicked the gesture. Social media erupted, but so did the backlash. Within the hour, critics in Paris labeled it a publicity stunt. European agricultural companies issued statements cautioning against unverified safety protocols. A cable news commentator in Washington sneered, "You can't drink your way to credibility, not in this world." In the capital, opposition politicians released a joint letter declaring the event a brazen self-celebration and proof of perilous populism. One international journalist tweeted, "One glass doesn't create a system. Burkina's plant still lacks EU certification. This isn't proof, it's performance art." But in Ouagadougou's public square, hundreds had gathered around the central projection screen to witness the broadcast. After the glass was emptied, no one moved for several moments. Then a woman stepped forward, held up her own bottle of Faso kosam, and drank. No speech, only unity prevails. Then another joined, and yet another, until the throng shared in the drink, silent and dignified. In a school beyond Fodnagorma, a teacher, Mr. Banyo, paused the lesson to present the clip to her students. After viewing, she turned off the screen and declared, "You do not applaud a man drinking milk. You applaud the nation that made it possible, the people who made it a reality." Do you believe Traoré has ignited a new revolution in Africa? Comment Amen if you stand with his brave leadership and vision for independence. That evening, the state channel rebroadcast the segment twice, unedited, without music, just the moment. One glass, one nation. At the factory, Salima entered the chilling room and gazed at the crates, now piled to the ceiling. "Ready to move?" Jabari inquired. She nodded affirmatively. "They no longer wait. They desire it. They believe in it." He handed her a list. 3 new regions just requested a weekly supply, and the army seeks daily delivery for their school feeding initiatives. She beamed. "That's the first battle. I shall gladly engage." Meanwhile, in a foreign embassy in the capital, diplomats observed the footage in silence. One of them reclined in his chair and remarked, "He just proclaimed independence with a glass of milk." And indeed he had. Later that night, when the cameras ceased and the lights dimmed, Traoré sat alone in his office, a half-empty bottle of Faso kosam resting beside him. He gazed out the window, observing the stars above the city that once could not sustain itself. He whispered, "We did not merely create milk, we forged memory." And somewhere in a village, a mother tucked her child into bed, kissed their brow, and said, "You drink this now, you sleep strong. This came from us." The bottle remained cold, and the future warm. The runway at Ouagadougou International had not witnessed this much foreign traffic in years. That morning, 3 private jets landed one after another, each bearing executives in tailored suits, polished shoes, and briefcases worth more than most villagers earned in a year. They arrived with handshakes prepared and contracts already printed. They came from Paris, Geneva, Brussels, and Berlin. They came because a single glass of milk had rattled global confidence. Fascosum's triumph had emerged as a market threat. The test results had gone worldwide. African consumers were raising new inquiries. Who truly owned their food? Why were they consuming powdered milk from Europe when Borsina's was purer, fresher, and more affordable? At the dairy plant, Traoré readied for their arrival, without pomp, no red carpet, no air-conditioned conference rooms, nor interpreters. Traoré would guide them through what they came to witness, nothing more. The first delegation hailed from a prominent French dairy conglomerate. Their regional director, a slender man with a smooth voice and silver cufflinks, disembarked the plane with the assurance of one accustomed to warm welcomes. He beamed broadly. "We are here to assist you in scaling global distribution, top-tier packaging, EU export certification," he proclaimed. "We aim to elevate Fascosum to the world stage." Behind him, a Swiss banker interjected. "However, to achieve that, we would need to revise the ownership model, a controlling interest, merely to ensure international compliance, of course." The Belgian firm proposed a figure one that could have financed 2 additional factories, 3 highways, and 5 years of military salaries. Traore remained silent. He nodded courteously and gestured toward the awaiting transport. No military escort, just a dusty flatbed truck with benches in the back. The men hesitated, exchanged glances, then climbed aboard. The journey was bumpy, swift, and quiet. Upon their arrival at the plant, the first sight that greeted them was the cooling tower, adorned with vines, humming with solar energy. No fences. Children played nearby. Cows grazed leisurely behind a mud wall decorated with folk art. They anticipated chrome and steel. They discovered clay and sunlight. Inside, the pasteurization chamber was serene and pristine. Asha welcomed them in overalls, sweat glistening on her brow, tablet in hand. She gestured to the filtration unit and stated, 98% effective. Operates on local materials. Requires no electricity. Would you like a test sample? The French director smiled once more. No need. We trust the process. But let's discuss expansion. Shall we? Yet, Traore remained silent. The bottling section was next. Young engineers packed crates with precision. No conveyor belts, no robots, just hands and discipline. The Swiss banker produced a document. Our analysts believe we can automate this section and increase throughput by 300%. All we request is a 51% equity stake to commence. Then you retain the brand. It shall remain fascinating, he declared, then turned his gaze to the man. Yet still nothing. Outside, the assembly was guided to a shaded pavilion where local laborers enjoyed their midday meal. Millet cakes, boiled yam, and cups of milk. A child dashed by, clutching a bottle of Faso, stumbling slightly and laughing joyfully. No guard halted him. No one shouted. The Belgian envoy leaned closer. Captain, you could amass wealth personally. Sign these documents, and Europe will open every door imaginable. Traore finally responded. I did not construct doors. I erected walls, wide enough for all of us to traverse. The men blinked in surprise. He continued. You perceive labor. I perceive ownership. You see markets. I see mouths nourished. You desire equity, yet we have already invested our lives. What you propose can purchase machines, not memories. The Frenchman cleared his throat. Surely we can reach some form of agreement. Perhaps a partnership? Traore offered him a chilled bottle. Here lies your partnership. No signature, no contract, just milk. Back in Paris, the atmosphere shifted. The investors returned, empty-handed. No photographs, no licenses, no leverage. They could not elucidate it. The operation functioned, yet rejected capital. The market was ravenous, yet refused to sell. A leaked memo from the European Agricultural Board later disclosed their apprehension. Burkina Faso's model presents a structural threat to existing market hierarchies. If replicated, it may ignite a sovereignty movement in African agriculture. That was the moment Paris froze, not due to war, but because a nation had quietly declared no and continued onward with one bottle, and no need for explanation. The letter arrived in a white envelope adorned with gold trim, delivered by a private courier who wore sunglasses and uttered not a word. Salima was in the barn, wrist deep in a pail of water, when her son presented her the envelope. She dried her hands on her wrap, opened it, and read. Her brow remained unmoved. It was a formal offer, $30 million, for the land. Not merely the section under the dairy project, but all of it. Her grazing fields, her family's well, the mango trees her father planted before she drew breath. The sender was a multinational agricultural group based in Luxembourg, supported by a coalition of European investors. The letter lauded her contributions to national progress, cited their intent to build upon her legacy, and promised to elevate the facility to global compliance and production standards. All they required was her land. That evening, the family convened in her courtyard. The paper lay at the center of the table like a coiled serpent. Her brother could not remain still. That's more than we'd ever earn. In 10 lifetimes, he exclaimed, pacing. Do you grasp what this could truly mean for us? For our children's future? You could retire, Salima, her eldest daughter added. Never labor another day. You could finally find rest. You could construct a hospital in the village, a genuine one. Doctors, clean water, no longer just dreams. Even her mother, who seldom spoke above a whisper, leaned forward. It's merely land, child. Land grows weary. But money nourishes the weary. Salima remained silent. She rose, walked to the edge of the field where the cows had settled, and gazed out. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the furrows in the ground, the footprints of children who had come for milk that morning, the shadows of trees that had outlasted kings. She returned to the table and spoke softly. You do not sell land, nourished by your ancestors' milk. Her brother slammed the table. That's poetry, not policy. You're not thinking clearly right now. She met his gaze. I'm thinking clearer than I ever have in my life. That paper isn't a gift. It's a grave, a beautiful one. The following day, the courier returned, waiting outside the gate. She walked past him with a folded letter in her hand. Take this back, she commanded. Inform them the answer is no. The man remained motionless. There will be another offer. Higher? I do not require a higher number, she replied. I already comprehend my worth, and that suffices. Within hours, the refusal reached the press. The headline proclaimed, Burkina Faso farmer rejects $30 million. Land deal emphasizes ancestral honor. European outlets treated it as folklore. African media hailed it as bravery. Yet within her own family, silence lingered. Her brother did not speak to her for 3 days. Her daughter wept. Even the village imam visited to gently inquire if she would reconsider. She did not. Instead, she traversed the village, explaining her choice to every woman who had ever brought a cow to her pasture. She spoke at the school, the clinic, the market. I'm not retaining the land for myself, she stated. I'm preserving it for us. For once you relinquish it, you forfeit not just the land, but the tales woven within it. In the meantime, the company increased its proposal. 60 million, a confidential assembly, a position on the board, a lifetime annuity. Salima remained silent. Traoré came to see her that week. He did not attempt to sway her. He simply sat beside her, on a bench, both gazing toward the horizon. They will never comprehend, you know, he remarked. They need not, she answered. They must simply depart. He nodded in agreement. We do not fight to conquer. We fight to remember our essence. The following dawn, a new sign was erected at the field's entrance. It was unadorned, merely carved wood, hand-painted. No milk for sale, no land for sale. Just honor, offered daily. It did not halt the calls. It did not cease the offers, but it ended the silence. Mothers began bringing their daughters to Salima's field, not solely to learn milking, but to learn the power of refusal. Young girls observed her hands, yet listened to her words. You do not wait to be valued, she proclaimed. You choose at this very moment. And somewhere, in a boardroom in Europe, a vexed executive scrawled a note across the final rejection letter. The land will not yield, nor will she. The inaugural shipment crossed the border at dawn. 6 trucks, each adorned in white and green, their sides emblazoned with bold lettering, Faso Kosam, from our land to yours. Inside were thousands of milk cartons, packed with solar-cooled precision, driven by young Burkinabe mechanics, trained through the new National Logistics Program. The destination, Bamako, Mali. By noon, children in schoolyards across Mali tasted Faso Kosam for the very first time. Cartons were distributed alongside dry bread and rice. Each bore a message, printed in 3 languages, proudly crafted in Burkina Faso. Nourishment from the Sahel. The response was swift. Astonishment at the flavor, thrill at the packaging, incredulity that it was not from Europe. News cameras captured the moment. A Malian boy raised his carton and asked, "Why have we not always had this?" Within 48 hours, distribution requests poured in from Senegal, Togo, and Niger. The Foreign Ministry established a dedicated team solely to manage export coordination. Faso Kosam had evolved into more than a milk brand. It transformed into a regional movement, a beacon of self-reliance, sustainable agriculture, and Africa nourishing itself. Yet the jubilation was short-lived before the tempest arose. In Brussels, a coalition of European dairy producers issued a united statement. denouncing Faso Kosam's growth. They labeled it a menace to existing economic alliances, accusing the Burkinabe government of unfair trade practices, excessive subsidies, and deviation from standard dairy protocols. In truth, it was none of those things. What alarmed them was not the milk, it was the model. Burkina Faso had birthed a product cleaner than theirs, more affordable, without slashing wages, and cherished, without advertising expenditures, and they had achieved it without a single euro of European oversight. Suddenly, tariffs were proposed. Border regulations were scrutinized. Health concerns were resurfaced, recycled from past failed smear campaigns. European retailers in Africa began withdrawing Faso Kosam cartons from select stores, citing supply inconsistencies. Behind the scenes, courteous yet resolute phone calls were made, urging Mali and Senegal to reconsider reliance on untested suppliers. Yet the consumers remained undeterred. In Bamako, shelves emptied within a week. In Lomé, parents queued to purchase boxes for their children. A woman was quoted plainly, "I never imagined I'd trust anything more than powdered milk from France. Then I tasted this." Traoré stood in the distribution center, observing crates being stamped, sealed, and loaded for a second wave of orders. Asha approached with a printout in hand. "Demand is now surpassing production," she stated. "We must double capacity within 6 months." He did not waver. "Then we shall," Jabari added softly. "The EU is preparing a case against us. At the WTO, they aim to frame this as a destabilizing act." Traoré regarded them both. "Nourishing your neighbors is not destabilization, it is justice." The government countered threats by publishing every test, every audit, and every logistical blueprint online. Nothing to conceal, everything to share. They invited independent laboratories from Ghana, Rwanda, and Kenya to validate their standards. Every lab returned with the same verdict: superior quality, transparent practice, and local control. Yet the pressure continued to mount. A French trade official cautioned in a private memo, "If this persists, European dairy influence across West Africa will collapse in less than 5 years." Back on the ground, no one paid heed. In the streets of Dakar, graffiti emerged overnight, spray painted onto alley walls and bus stops. "My milk bears a name, Faso Kosam." Salima journeyed to a partner farm in Mali and stood in silence as workers unpacked cartons and verified expiration dates. A teenage girl glanced up and softly asked, "Did you create this?" Salima beamed and answered, "No, we all did." Later that day, the girl was captured on film, pouring a carton into her little brother's cup. She gazed into the camera and proclaimed, "I no longer desire foreign food. I crave food that knows my name." The clip spread like wildfire across the continent. At the United Nations Trade Summit 2 weeks later, when a European delegate accused Burkina Faso of causing regional upheaval, Traoré replied, with a composed voice, "The only disruption we caused was to hunger." Then he opened a carton, raised it to the assembly, and took a sip. No applause erupted, yet all eyes were upon him, and in villages and cities alike, across borders, once drawn by colonial hands, children continued to drink. Families persisted in buying. Nations kept inquiring. For the first time in ages, Africa was nourished by Africa, and that was an unchangeable truth. For months, no one anticipated it. The dairy plant was visible. The trucks were visible. The milk cartons adorned shelves. But what fueled it all? The true reason Faso Kosam could deliver fresh milk across 5 nations without a single ice truck lay buried 3 feet underground. A cold chain, yet not the kind the world recognized. This one was solar-powered, gravity-assisted, moisture-regulated, and entirely unseen by foreign satellites. Pipes crafted from compressed clay and polymer, designed by Burkinabe engineers and installed discreetly at night. Cooling chambers, interconnected by underground tunnels. Radiant heat displaced into bioresin domes. The system didn't hum, it breathed. It was graceful, silent, and astonishingly efficient. when European dairy firms realized they couldn't fathom how Faso Kosam's milk remained cold, from Burkina Faso to the coast of Benin. Without a single refrigerated truck, they dispatched a delegation to investigate. The report they returned with incited panic in Paris. There is no conventional cold chain. Their energy consumption is minimal, nearly non-existent. Their carbon footprint is virtually zero, as Signor Consultant explained. It's as if the system doesn't exist. Yet, somehow, it functions, another engineer remarked, shaking his head. That's when the accusations began. French patent lawyers lodged a complaint with the World Intellectual Property Organization. They claimed that Faso Kosam's underground cooling method infringed upon 2 EU patents registered by a French agritech firm 5 years prior. The assertion stated that the radiant displacement design and ceramic insulation ratios employed by the Burkinabe team bore an uncanny resemblance to those European prototypes. The French embassy in Ouagadougou issued a formal inquiry demanding a halt on exports until the issue could be settled. Traoré refrained from public comment. Instead, he arranged a press conference. The room was filled. European reporters, African media, legal analysts, NGO observers. A French journalist posed the first question directly. Captain Traoré, did your engineers replicate French technology in any way? Before Traoré could respond, a hand rose at the back of the room. Jabari stepped forward, holding a worn folder. He approached the front, placed it on the podium, and opened it. Inside were schematics, hand-drawn, coffee-stained, dated and signed diagrams of airflow, solar convergence calculations, clay pressure resistance tests. Each page bore the emblem of the University of Ouagadougou. 2 years ago, Jabari began, ***, this was my thesis. Rejected by European journals, ignored by Western labs until this moment. It keeps our milk cold, without a single drop of diesel. ***, he raised a page, dated April 19th, 2023. Is that your patent date? He queried the French official present. The man remained silent. Asha stepped forward next. Your nation taught us to seek validation from abroad, but we ceased waiting. We validated ourselves on our own land, she declared. Selima, seated in the front row, clapped once. The room echoed her. Later that day, the Burkinabe Ministry of Justice issued a statement. No European patent was utilized. No law was transgressed. What was shattered was the illusion that innovation must bear a European visage. Yet France persisted. The case transitioned to an international arbitration committee, but swiftly unraveled. Independent experts confirmed the dates, the lab notes, the field tests were conducted long before the alleged French patent even came into existence. The original clay prototype still rested in the corner of Jabari's family home, its cracks and imperfections visible proof of its origin. The French case crumbled. Traoré never delivered a speech. He merely invited the press to explore the underground system. Reporters traversed through sun-cooled tunnels, observed temperature sensors, blink quietly, and touched the clay walls that held cool air like cherished memory. A journalist from Nairobi whispered, "This is not merely a pipeline, it is a backbone, steadfast and vibrant." That evening, an internal email leaked from the European Agriculture Council encapsulated the emerging dread. They did not rob us of our future. They forged their own while we stood by, and indeed they had, not in laboratories, not with grants in the billions, but with clay, sweat, and quietude, the kind of quietude that goes unnoticed until it nourishes a continent. The conference hall in Brussels was designed for accolades, plush chairs, crystal chandeliers, flags draped in solemn lines. It was where global agricultural policy had been deliberated for decades, where farmers donned suits, and milk was discussed in millions of liters, not poured into cups. Yet this year's EU Dairy Innovation Summit commenced with a jolt. On the main stage, behind a polished wooden lectern, hung a banner no one anticipated, nourishing Faso, one glass at a time. Below it was an enlarged image of a Burkinabe boy, clutching a carton of Faso Kosam, eyes wide, mid-smile, teeth gleaming white with milk. For the first time in memory, a European summit showcased an African dairy system as a case study, not as a recipient of aid, but as a beacon of inspiration. The presenter was a Dutch expert in sustainability. She adjusted her spectacles, cleared her throat, and began. This model was crafted without diesel, without refrigeration vehicles, and entirely devoid of European engineering firms. And yet, she continued, Faso Kosam now consistently delivers fresh milk across 5 nations, with an energy footprint lower than any EU dairy facility today. She clicked to the next slide. Clay cold chain designs, sensor graphs, village-level production statistics, no additives, no chemicals. Infant nutrition levels in recipient regions have surged by 12% in merely 4 months, she stated softly. The data speaks volume. The atmosphere shifted. A few subtler notes, a few raised eyebrows. Among the crowd sat farmers from Germany, Poland, France, many of whom had battled soaring energy costs, unpredictable subsidies, and corporate monopolies pushing smallholders out of business. To them, Faso Kosam was not a threat. It was a reflection, revealing what they had forfeited in the quest for scale. A French farmer leaned towards his neighbor and remarked, "They constructed a system on trust and sunlight, while we built debt and bureaucracy." Another whispered softly, "And they accomplished it without us, without our assistance." In the lobby, discussions turned profoundly personal. European citizens, especially younger delegates, began to question the very logic of their food systems. Why could not their milk come from local cows cooled by the earth, not chemicals? Why had small farms disappeared, replaced by factories? Meanwhile, media coverage spread rapidly. One Belgian outlet published a front-page article titled, "Burkina Faso's Milk Revolution Puts Europe on the Defensive." A Danish television panel openly debated whether the EU should import Burkina-Bay engineering talent to modernize their own outdated infrastructure. A viral tweet displayed a side-by-side image. On the left, an EU milk facility with smokestacks and steel. On the right, the clay-chilled tunnels of Faso Kosam. The caption read, "One nurtures profit. One nurtures people." Back in Burkina Faso, Trier observed it unfold from a quiet office. No celebration, no interviews, just a gentle smile as he read messages flooding in from European citizens, seeking blueprints, collaboration, guidance. "Are you seeing this?" Asha entered holding a tablet. "Yes," he replied softly. "They desire our specifications." He gazed at her. "We shall share them openly." "Are you certain?" she inquired. He nodded. "Because that is the essence. It is not a secret. It is a seed." At the summit, a moment arrived that no one anticipated. An Italian youth representative stood during the Q&A and addressed the panel directly. "Why do we subsidize outdated systems while Faso Kosam flourishes on principles we forsook? Why are they steering the future, and we're deliberating how to preserve the past?" Silence ensued. Then one clap, then another, then a wave of applause. Not for rivalry, but for clarity. Later that day, a European commissioner delivered a closing remark. Faso Kosam reminds us of something deeper than innovation. It reminds us that dignity is scalable, and in that polished chamber of policies and panels, for the first time, the dialogue was not about how to assist Africa in catching up. It was about how to catch up with Africa. Outside the venue, activists stood with signs proclaiming, "We desire milk that remembers its origins." And beneath a drizzling Brussels sky, a carton of Faso Kosam rested on a newsstand, unopened, yet widely recognized. The announcement came with the weight of a warning. The European Commission, supported by lobbying pressure from major dairy conglomerates, issued a resolution invoking trade sanctions on Burkina Faso. The rationale was cloaked in legal jargon: unauthorized use of technology, destabilization of regional dairy markets, failure to adhere to standard intellectual property protocols. But the message was clear. Burka had crossed the line, and they would face the consequences. In mere days, port authorities in several European-aligned nations began to reject shipments of Fosokum cartons and cold chain equipment. The financial division of an international development bank halted an approved loan intended for the expansion of solar cooling tunnels. a French telecom provider, discreetly severed data access for the engineers, overseeing the rural distribution systems. From Geneva to Berlin, a barrier was rising, not against arms, but against milk. At the presidential office in Ouagadougou, Traoré scanned the sanction list in silence. Then he gazed out the window, where children gathered outside a local school, each clutching an empty bottle, waiting to be filled. Salima sat across from him. They truly believe they can break us, Traoré responded softly. They don't realize we bend like clay, and then rise anew. That afternoon, Traoré summoned a press conference. No flags, no advisors, just one podium, one mic, one statement, he declared. You attempted to halt a pipeline, he continued. But pipelines were never the aim. The aim was multiplication. Reporters murmured in astonishment. He paused, then proclaimed, effective immediately, the government of Burkina Faso will release all technical designs, engineering blueprints, and cooling system documentation of the Faso model at no cost to 12 partner nations across Africa. Gasps resonated. We will not sell it. We will not license it. We will gift it, he emphasized, deliberately. What you sought to stop will now multiply. The room froze, then erupted into applause. By nightfall, embassies across the continent were requesting downloads. Ministries of Agriculture rushed to dispatch engineers. Delegates from Kenya, Uganda, Sierra Leone, Chad, Malawi, and Mozambique confirmed receipt of the files. The documents arrived with a note built by hands, meant for many. Social media ignited. The hashtag #MilkMultiplies trended from Lagos to Lusaka. Videos of African engineers unveiling the blueprints, assembling filtration units, and constructing clay insulation walls went viral within hours. A technician in Namibia shared a clip of a milk chiller humming gently beneath the desert sun, captioned, "No patents, just progress." Europe watched in disbelief. A leaked internal report from a Scandinavian tech firm stated, "We underestimated cultural alignment. They're not merely exporting a product, they're exporting a philosophy." Back in Burkina Faso, the engineers at the original plant pressed on without pause. Jabari led a team, transforming assembly lines into training hubs. Asha coordinated remote teaching sessions with university labs in Kigali and Lusaka. Trucks that once transported cartons now carried instructors. In Cotonou, a Togolese minister held aloft a Faso Kosam manual and proclaimed, "This is the first foreign policy crafted from milk, a recipe for dignity." The sanctions continued to pour in, but the resistance had already transformed. It was no longer Burkina Faso standing alone. It was 12 nations, one blueprint, and a united refusal to be confined again. Traoré stood with Salima, observing new recruits arriving at the training grounds. Some arrived with nothing but a backpack. Others brought old dairy manuals, ready to burn them for firewood. She inquired of him, "Do you think they'll construct it as we did?" He shook his head. "No, they'll construct it better. That's the essence." A child dashed past them, waving a small flag, not of Burkina Faso, but of the African Union, hand-drawn, fluttering above a stick of sugarcane. That evening, in cities across the continent, projections of the Burkinabe flag illuminated buildings, monuments, even embassy walls. One stood out in a public square in Nairobi, where the flag was adorned with the words, "They tried to fold it, we made it soar." And it did, higher than sanctions, louder than threats, carried not by wind, but by sheer will. The bell tolled, just after sunrise, and barefoot children rushed into the courtyard of a small primary school in Zanari, clutching empty metal cups, and wide-eyed wonder. What awaited them wasn't a textbook, or a chalkboard, or a foreign instructor with handouts, but a woman in a patterned wrap, standing beside a steel milk drum, mounted on a wooden cart, Salima. She stirred the drum gently, the aroma of warm milk rising with the morning breeze. Behind her were crates, stacked with freshly filled cartons of Faso Kosam. No commercial label, no mascot, just a green stamp that read, "Made for you." One boy asked, "Is this from the city?" "No, child," she replied gently. "It's from the field." "Our field?" "The cows, you see, they consume what our mothers cultivate." They drink the water your fathers carry. This is your farm, too. The boy nodded slowly, as if something clicked within. All across Burkina Faso, similar scenes unfolded. The Ministry of Education, in direct collaboration with Faso Kosam leadership, had initiated the Children of the Cow program, an initiative for nourishing our youth, crafted to deliver a daily serving of fresh milk to each child enrolled, who is under 12 years of age. It transcended a mere health campaign. It became a powerful movement. Educators observed students, maintaining focus longer in class. Health professionals noted a decline in signs of anemia and vitamin deficiency. Parents saw their children inquiring, not solely about milk, but about the land, the cows, the entire system. That was when the NGOs appeared. A notably large international aid organization, headquartered in London, with satellite offices in Dar es Salaam and Abidjan, issued a press release titled Modern Dairy for African Classrooms, a new model from our ground partners. Nowhere in the release was Faso Kosam mentioned. Nowhere was Burkina Faso referenced. The release came with glossy brochures and promotional banners dispatched to local schools without consent. Within them, the Milk Initiative was rebranded with a new title, Project Pure Drop. The cartons remained unchanged. The milk inside stayed the same, yet the labels displayed the NGO's logo, slogans in English, not in Murula. Asha was the first to notice the flyers and stormed into the office, one flyer clenched in her fist. "They're whitewashing our efforts," she asserted. "They've placed their name on our harvest." Traore remained composed. "Have we ceased nourishing the children?" "No," she answered. "Then we shall nourish them louder." Salima took the initiative. The following day, she returned to the Zenari school with 2 crates of milk and a small chalkboard. She sat up beneath a mango tree and wrote in bold letters, "This milk comes from here." She gazed at the children, now arranged in a half circle, and proclaimed, "Your name isn't on their box, but it's in every drop. They cannot claim what your hands have created." The teacher applauded. The children joined in. Later that week, when a regional NGO representative arrived with branded tents and photographers, Salima stood at the gate and inquired, "Whose cows grace your pictures?" The woman faltered, "We aim to craft a unified campaign image for global appeal." Salima stepped forward. "This isn't merely a campaign. It's a kitchen." She paused. "You don't enter a woman's kitchen and rename her stew." The woman retreated in silence. In response, Faso Kosam produced a new batch of cartons, each adorned with illustrations crafted by students. Cows with wings, children holding buckets, fields with flags, each carton unique, every label rooted in a village's hand. The campaign spread more swiftly than any rebranding could contain. Soon, schools from Ghana and Niger sought visits. Student delegations arrived with notebooks, eager to learn how to establish similar programs. Children began crafting songs, chants, even poems, celebrating the milk and the land. In Ouagadougou, a public mural was painted by high school students. It depicted a cow nurturing a child beneath a baobab tree, surrounded by books, pencils, and milk cartons. Across the top, it proclaimed, "We don't consume ed, we consume home." The NGO discreetly withdrew its rebranded materials and issued a vague apology. No one took notice. By then, the movement had surpassed the need for permission. One afternoon, as Salima prepared to depart a school in Kaya, a girl gently tugged at her skirt. "Can I be a farmer?" she asked softly. Salima knelt and cupped her face. "You already are," she whispered kindly. "You just haven't milked your future yet." Behind them, a line of children awaited, not just for milk, but for memory. The factory lay silent. No reporters, no guards, just the gentle hum of cooling systems and the faint clink of glass bottles rolling along the line. It was early before dawn, and the first shift had yet to arrive. Yet the door opened nonetheless. Traore stepped in barefoot, his uniform replaced. "We are simply linen tunic. No sash, no radio, no security." He walked slowly, like a man returning to something older than power. The concrete floor felt cool beneath his feet. The aroma struck him first, sweet, earthy, vibrant milk. He passed the filtration room, where the same clay coils they once deemed primitive now chilled half the continent's breakfast. He paused by the pasteurization chamber, brushing his hand along the control panel. His fingers left a trace of dust. He smiled. Down the hallway in the bottling wing, crates stood prepared for shipment, each one hand-labeled by students in the Children of the Cow program. Some cartons bore drawings of cows. Others displayed messages in crayon for Grandma. Drink and grow. Thank you, Field. He ventured further in and reached the final station, a hand-filling line designated for small local orders. Behind it sat a solitary bottle, chilled and awaiting, with a note folded beneath its cap. Captain, savor it one last time. A gentle voice read on the card. It was signed, Salima. Traore uncapped the bottle, poured a glass, and raised it to his lips. He hesitated to drink. He observed the liquid catch the faint light, swirling calmly, like a storm recalled, yet past. Then he took a sip. Warm, pure, authentic. A voice echoed from behind, soft, high. Does it still taste as it once did? He turned. A young girl stood there, holding a notebook and a small bucket. Barefoot as well, perhaps 10 years old. She stepped closer, observing his expression. He gave a nod of understanding. Even better, he murmured gently. She filled a glass for herself, from the same vessel, careful to spill not a single drop. Then she took a sip. When she had finished, she lifted her gaze and whispered, "It tastes like home." He remained silent. He was unable to respond. Instead, he reached forward softly, wiped a drop of milk from her chin, and offered her his glass. "You shall lead the next one," he declared. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Me?" he affirmed with a nod. "Every revolution requires a refill." The girl laughed joyfully and dashed down the corridor. Her footsteps light, her voice echoing into the stillness. "Tell them I am on my way." He lingered behind. Traore surveyed the plant, now illuminated by the softest morning light. Everything still, everything vibrant. He passed by the main doors once more, past rows of hanging uniforms, past Salima's chalkboard, where someone had noted yesterday's tally, 14,620 children nourished. He brushed his hand over the figures and spoke softly to no one. "We did not merely create milk, we instilled belief." Outside, the sky transformed into soft gold. In a nearby classroom, the first bell chimed, and in the distant corner of the factory, a pump began to hum. It would be a day filled with purpose, many more to nourish. Yet in that fleeting moment, the president, still carrying the scent of milk, walked slowly toward the light, serene, smiling, and liberated. He paused at the threshold, absorbing the gentle hum, the aroma of milk, the quiet promise of a new day. Behind him, children would awaken to partake in what their hands helped create. Ahead of him, a continent stirred with a different kind of hunger, one for dignity, for self-determination, for something that felt like home. Traore did not merely construct a factory. He forged a future, not through grand speeches, but through steps taken barefoot, through belief poured into bottles and shared without hesitation. And now, perhaps the true question is this: what does your food remember? Would you recognize your own story? In what fills your plate? Could your community create what they accomplished? Something enduring, genuine, and shared? If this tale resonates with you, if Traore, the field, and that bottle of milk hold significance, then let others hear it as well. Give it a like, share it with someone who still believes in a brighter future, and do not forget to subscribe, so you won't miss what comes next. Millions were at stake, a future laid with promises, contracts, and comforts, but he chose the dust beneath his feet, the hum of tranquil machines, and a child's drawing on a milk carton. Thank you for being present. We shall return shortly with the next installment. Until then, care for one another, keep your feet grounded, and your hearts wide open.